Welcome to Treadmill Talks with Shannon Maves, a podcast for athletes and fitness enthusiasts to pass the time during mind-numbing cardio while I use my no-bullshit coaching style to educate, inspire, and entertain. I'm your host, Shannon Maves. Now let's walk and talk. Hello and welcome to episode 55 of Treadmill Talks, the one where I fucked up. Part 1. That's right. There's 2 parts to this. I will always be the first one to admit that I have made a lot of mistakes in my life, but I'm also very much the person who learns and grows from those mistakes too. I believe there's a lot of truth in the saying, you never lose, you either win or you learn. And I've learned a lot because I have failed a lot. I have failed so many times that this is a 2-part episode. But in a way, I kind of love when I fail or fuck up or just make a mistake because it makes me a better, stronger, and wiser person. And the mistakes that I have made over the years as a competitor have made me a better coach. I have absolutely no doubts about that. Which is why I want to share with you today all of the mistakes that I have made over the almost a decade that I have been competing now. Buckle up, y'all, because I have made all of the mistakes. All of them. I literally took a few weeks before recording this episode just to compile a list of all of the mistakes that I've made over the years in order to make sure that I hit all of them. And I'm probably still missing a few. But don't worry, there's still plenty here. So what I'm going to do is break them down in order by each prep I've ever done and tell you what mistakes I made and how I learned from them. My first prep was in 2014. And you guys, I had no fucking clue what I was doing back then. I just knew that I liked lifting weights and that eating clean would help me get lean. So I did your typical bro diet. Like tilapia and asparagus on repeat kind of bullshit. I remember literally having tilapia and asparagus for breakfast at one point. And I hate cooked fish. And I'm not the biggest fan of asparagus either. But like, that's what all the bodybuilders do. So I figured that that's what I had to do. Thank fucking God I wised up soon after that and I started educating myself more on nutrition. But I still hate tilapia to this day. And I'm only kind of okay with asparagus now. But I'm glad I made that mistake because it taught me what not to let my clients do with their diets. You need variety. And you do not need to eat shit if you don't like it. I also did not realize the importance of really training glutes. Like I would do squats and shit, but I thought that I already had amazing glutes. Nope. It was just fat. Lots of fat. And that's where my body keeps it. And when I started to lean out, my booty just deflated. That was a wake-up call. And it really helped me figure out how to assess different types of body compositions. That was probably the beginning of when I really started to develop an eye for the sport and got good at knowing how to train different body types. As far as training, though, I thought it was the most important thing. And don't get me wrong, it is obviously very important in bodybuilding and in life. But you cannot out-train a bad diet or poor sleep. But my dumbass would sacrifice sleep in order to go to the gym. I would wake up balls early or go to the gym late at night or do whatever I had to do at any cost just to get my workouts done. You know that rest when you die mentality? I thought more was better, better, better. But now I know that sleep is the best medicine for like everything, including building muscle and losing body fat. Make time elsewhere, but do not sacrifice your sleep, at least not on a regular basis. My first prep was also my very first diet ever. I had never really, truly ever been hungry in my entire life. Like, I had experienced hunger, obviously, and there were brief periods of time where I felt famished after a workout or something. But dieting hard enough to get stage lean, which I didn't, by the way, but we'll get into that shortly. But dieting hard enough to get stage lean requires some actual fucking hunger. Hunger that I had never experienced. And I definitely became a hangry asshole at times. I still thank my husband for staying with me during that first prep. I don't know how he put up with me. He's really a saint. And even though I was a total dick at times, I'm glad it happened. Because I've been able to go into other preps feeling much more prepared for the emotional state of hanger. Like, I'm proactive about the crazy now. And I will literally tell my husband if I'm having a low energy day and I'm feeling a bit on edge. That hanger does get easier to deal with every single time you prep too. For multiple reasons though. Most competitors eventually learn how to structure their meals and their training and everything else so that the hanger is kept to a minimum. But you also just grow so much internally from competing. It's a physical sport, yeah, of course, but it's really a mental sport. And I'm glad that I've experienced true hunger now because it's opened my eyes quite a bit. Like, we are so goddamn lucky to be able to pick and choose what and how often we eat because there are so many people in this world who are experiencing that type of hunger, if not worse, who are not doing it by choice. Competing is a privilege, y'all. Do not forget that. Now, I mentioned that I didn't get lean enough, and I didn't, because like I said, I had no clue what I was doing. But something else you need to consider is that in 2014, the bikini division looked a lot different than it does nowadays. And girls weren't shredded. Even still, though, I didn't get lean enough. That was when I realized just how much fat really was on my ass. But again, I'm glad it happened. Because now I can be honest with my clients and tell them like, nah, dude, you still got a ways to go. Whenever people tell me they want to compete, I like to tell them, you know that last 5 to 10 pounds, that's really hard to get off? Well, you're going to need to lose that plus like another 5 to 10 more pounds. Now, another mistake I made during my first prep. Yes, we are still on mistakes from my first prep. I told you this was a 2-part episode. But to be fair, this is when a good percentage of my mistakes were made. My third and fourth preps were also quite the learning experiences too. So stay tuned for those. But another mistake that I made during my first prep was posing. I tried to teach myself how to pose by watching YouTube videos. Oh, fucking Christ, please don't do that. In 2014, bikini had only been around for 4 years, so the posing hadn't actually changed all that much yet, but it had still changed because posing is always evolving. I'm already watching the trends with 2024 posing routines. Now that the division has been around longer, the changes are more subtle, but they're still there. So you cannot watch posing videos that are a few years old on YouTube and expect them to hold up to today's standards. And posing is highly individual. Yes, we all have the same kind of basic foundation of a routine and the same front and back poses, but there are different ways to hit those poses based on your bone structure, where you hold more body fat, what body parts you need to hide or show off more. And there are always different ways to transition between poses as well. Some are more sassy and sultry routines, some are more bubbly routines, and some are more basic. Which, by the way, basic is not a bad thing with posing, by the way. I'm definitely a more basic poser, and I've had judges give me positive feedback about my posing before. But you have to develop a routine that suits you. You can't just watch YouTube and copy someone else's routine. Now, the last and one of the biggest mistakes that I made during that first prep was stocking up and hoarding all kinds of post-show treats. And looking at all of the restaurants that I wanted to eat at after the show. I had a whole list of everywhere I was going to go out to eat. Burgers, pizza, cookies, ice cream, Mexican food, pancakes, you name it. I had a spot where I was planning to hit up soon after my show to satisfy all the foods that I hadn't been eating because I was eating tilapia and asparagus every day. And this is just a fucking recipe for disaster. I know that when you're deep in prep, food can become almost like porn, and you fantasize about it. But don't torture yourself looking on Instagram at all of the food you can't eat right now. And don't go to the grocery store and stock up on all the food that you want in that moment, because that food is still going to be there after your show. You don't need to hoard it all away like the apocalypse is coming, because it's just going to make your post-show experience that much harder. And making a list of restaurants is also not something I suggest either. One of the biggest lessons that I've learned from this is that once you start to bring food back up and reverse out of a show, those cravings that are so intense right now are going to become less and less. But if you have it in your head that you need to eat all of those things, then you're more than likely going to go out and eat them, even if you don't want them, because you told yourself you needed them, which is something that I try to remind myself of now. When people ask me, what's the first thing you're going to eat after your show? I now respond with whatever I feel like in that moment. Because there was one year I was all hyped about a post-show burger. But then when the show ended, all I wanted was fruit. So I ended up going for an acai bowl first thing. I did eat my burger later on, but I was glad that I hadn't told myself, I have to eat a burger right after the show. Now, my second prep was actually one of my favorite preps to date. After all of the mistakes and the hanger during my first prep, I was slightly hesitant to do it all again. So I didn't compete again until 2017. But this time, I didn't do a bro diet. I actually did my entire prep eating intuitively, which is not something I actually suggest and is definitely not something that I plan to do again in the future, but I learned from it. After experiencing what true hunger felt like during my first prep, I had a better idea of how hungry I was supposed to be versus what too much hunger felt like. But in retrospect, I was definitely not eating enough protein to maintain the muscle that I had built over the course of the 3 years that I took off between those shows. And I didn't really treat those years in between as an improvement season, since I wasn't even sure if I would ever step on stage again. So between not training properly and not getting sufficient protein during my prep, I came in looking skinny. I was lean enough this time around. And I mean, I did have muscle and definition and shit, but my feedback was literally, you're too slender. Because my tall ass gets skinny when I lean out. And I hadn't built all that much yet. And then I lost a lot of what I had built due to eating in a deficit on top of not getting enough protein. Which then led me to making the exact opposite mistake during my third prep. I didn't cut down hard enough. In 2018, I started another prep, but this time I tracked my macros. Actually, no, that's a lie. I tracked just calories and protein, which is also not something that I recommend for competitors during prep. I do think that just tracking calories and protein can be fine for some lifestyle clients or as an occasional break from tracking all three macros if you're a competitor during an improvement season. But your carbs and fats do matter, especially when you are cutting down that hard and need to peak and everything. But tracking calories is not the most accurate. And I was eating more than I was reporting, which was also partially because I was incorporating way too much variety. Variety is great, don't get me wrong. If you're a lifestyle client or in an improvement season, you want a fair amount of variety to ensure you are getting enough micronutrients and you aren't creating deficiencies. But during competition prep, simplicity and consistency are key. I hadn't learned that yet, though. I had to make the mistake of trying all of the fun macro hacks first in order to really learn the importance of single ingredient whole foods. Protein powders and sugar-free bullshit made up way too much of what I consumed during that third prep. My digestion was off, I was always retaining water, and I was not getting lean enough quick enough. So my dumbass figured that I just need to push harder, not wait and push back my show or anything. No, let's just push harder. That'll work. Except it didn't. And I still stepped on stage, not lean enough at my first show. I did 3 shows that season, though. And by the third one, I actually was lean enough. And I finally pulled off my first open class win. But the damage had already been done at that point. And my hunger hormones had been completely fucked because of how hard I pushed at the end. Leptin and ghrelin are your hunger hormones, and they work in opposition of each other to tell your body when it is hungry and when it is full. But when you starve yourself, they start to kind of flip-flop, and you feel like you are always hungry and you never feel full, which is exactly what happened to me. I remember going out to eat after that last show and just gorging myself, but I didn't feel full. And I legit still felt kind of hungry, despite my stomach being insanely distended. 2 days after the show, we were driving back home because it was a Vegas show and I was living in Tucson. And on that drive home, I started feeling sick. But it was a different feeling than I had ever experienced before. Like my stomach hurt from eating so much, but I was still hungry. And the sickness that I was feeling also felt like I was deficient in something. So I was like grossly full, but still hungry and felt like my body still needed some sort of fuel. And I mean, I was deficient in something because I had been under eating so severely for the last month or two that my body was probably deficient in a ton of shit, actually. But I figured, okay, I need to eat to get back whatever my body is craving and missing. So I kept eating even though my stomach was distended and hurt and I was full, but not full at the same time. It's weird to explain. Anyways, I ended up throwing up at an Oregano's in like somewhere in Phoenix, I think. Not my proudest moment, which is exactly why I scream at people for under eating. I promise you that if your goal is fat loss, whether it be for a competition or just to feel more confident at the beach, eating less and less is not always the answer. In order to lose body fat, maintain muscle, and maintain internal health, you need to do a sort of controlled starvation. Because you do need to somewhat, quote, starve yourself in order to be in an actual deficit. But it needs to be done in a controlled manner. Otherwise, you are just going to lose muscle, bone density, weaken your immune system, and completely fuck up your hormone levels. Hunger hormones, sex hormones, thyroid, and more. I promise you that food is fuel and you still need to eat even if you are in a fat loss phase. Now, if you haven't already caught on, this was the first time that I royally fucked up my reverse diet after a show. My very first reverse diet wasn't awesome, but this one was bad because clearly I had done some internal damage. Now, I do want to be clear that it is not abnormal for hormones to get out of whack after a competition prep. A lot of competitors will still experience things like excessive hunger post-show, even if they did a very healthy prep. Sometimes it just comes with the territory of getting truly stage lean. So if you experience this, please don't go blaming or bashing your coach. Stay the course and trust them to guide you through your reverse diet, and things will level back out in time. And you and your coach will learn more and more about your body during this time. But in my case, there were multiple factors that led to a terrible reverse. Not only were my hormones fucked up, but I went through a very big life transition during this time. Because my husband had just been promoted to management at the restaurant we had both been serving at. So it was time for me to get out of the restaurant industry, which was fine. I was happy to do so after 8 years of serving tables. But I went from a very active job where my steps were easily over 15,000 on any given day of the week, sometimes going above 20,000, to a sedentary 9-to-5 job. So my activity level dropped a ton, which I did not account for when I was raising my calories back up. And I raised them back up way too quickly, which is one of many reasons why I am such a huge fan of tracking daily steps now. Because not only can changes in our lifestyle change our activity level, but also because when you are in an extreme deficit, your body is going to do whatever it can in order to preserve its energy, and we get lazier subconsciously. So I had fucked up my hormones, I was feeling lazier than usual, and I had suddenly become much more sedentary. But wait, there's more. I was also dealing with some depression at this point too, because I ended up really not liking the place I was working at. The job itself was badass. I loved what I was doing and the people that I was helping, but the commute and the company I was working for and some of the other bullshit was making me miserable. And while I was working weekdays now, my husband was still working nights and weekends. So I barely ever got to see the one person in the world who knows me well enough and knows how to calm me down and keep me sane during these types of times. And without him being there, I would eat my emotions from time to time. And I remember one Friday night coming home from a shit week when my husband was closing the restaurant, meaning he wouldn't be home till 1 or 2 a.m. and I would be fast asleep by that point. So I knew I wasn't going to see him. And I drank a bottle of wine and an entire box of Oreos. And I didn't feel full because my hormones were still fucked. Luckily, that was kind of my rock bottom, which is why I remember it so vividly. Soon afterward, I realized that I needed to quit that job and decided to pursue Shannon Maves Fitness full time. So again, I'm happy I fucked up so badly because it was kind of the kick in the ass that I needed to do what I'm doing now and get me to where I am today. But even after I hit rock bottom, I still didn't eat fantastically. My diet definitely consisted of a lot of pizza and ice cream and shit. But I told myself that it's because I was bulking, which in retrospect was my defense mechanism to justify all the weight that I had gained and the way I had been eating. Even though I had kind of calmed down as my hormones started to level back out and I wasn't overeating like a maniac anymore, my food choices still weren't great, which subsequently made me not feel very great either. Which brings me back to learning the importance of single ingredient whole foods. Always. Whether you're in a fat loss phase, a maintenance phase, or a building phase, you need to eat your damn veggies, okay? When your macros are higher, you can definitely afford to eat some more fun foods for sure, but you still need to prioritize your health. Getting your body and your digestion and everything to run efficiently during an improvement season will set you up for a better prep the next time around. But I didn't do that. And I went into my fourth prep in 2019 with a solid 30 pounds to lose. Luckily, I was smart enough to hire a coach at this point, which I don't think I mentioned. The first 3 preps and first 5 shows, I had actually been coaching myself. So a lot of those mistakes probably wouldn't have been made if I had had the guidance of a coach. But I'm glad I had those experiences because I learned and grew from them, which helped me going into my first prep with a coach. I took my macros a lot more seriously and followed the plan that she gave me to the T, which helped me a ton, both physically and mentally. But I still made other mistakes, which I'm going to share with you next week in part 2 of the one where I fucked up. Thank you for listening to Treadmill Talks. If this episode taught you something, lit a fire under your ass, or at least helped you forget how long you've been walking in place, please leave a review or take a screenshot to share on your social media. Don't forget to tag me at Shannon Maves so I can give you some love right back. And thanks again for listening to my Treadmill Talk.